Minutes later, still humming the song, Tony entered the pool yard. Had he been more observant, he would have noticed something amiss immediately. He blithely adjusted his goggles as he walked over to the deep end before diving into it. He let the water flow around him as he descended, curving just enough at the trough of his dive to keep himself from hitting the concrete bottom. Finally, as he curved, he noticed a shape a few feet in front of him, laying on the bottom of the pool. Eve's friend from boarding school, Lydia Lindell, had her eyes closed tight, her posture a fetal position so calm and serene it looked so natural. Trying not to panic, Tony scooped her up and brought her towards the nearest wall, kicking calmly to ensure that he was making progress. Breaking the surface, he gasped for air and set her on the edge of the pool. Quickly he climbed out of the pool and knelt down beside her, taking her wrist and checking her pulse. It was there, but soft. "Eve! Mortimer!" he shouted out as he tipped her head back and checked for breathing. Not feeling any air coming out, he began to administer CPR. Moments later, Eve walked in to see him pumping her friend's chest.
"What is it? I was watching—" "Tony, what are you doing?"
she exclaimed as she started to traverse the distance between them. "I came out to swim and found her at the bottom of the pool. I'm giving her CPR." Again he checked for breathing, but didn't find any.
"What? Tony, stop! Look at her feet!"
Tony ignored her, letting his lifeguard training continue to drive him as he once again tried to breathe into her lungs.
"She doesn't—"
Before Eve could finish her sentence, Lydia reached up and grabbed Tony, kissing him deeply as if waking from a good dream.
"Need it."
In shock, Tony stumbled and fell back into the pool. Stretching lightly, Lydia yawned and opened her eyes.
Eve? I just had the best dream.
"Lydia, Tony gave you CPR because you were on the bottom of the pool."
Lydia looked around her in confusion, searching for Tony.
Huh? What? Where is he?
As she spun her head around, Tony burst to the surface once again.
Oh. Hi.
Graciously, he accepted Lydia and Eve's help getting out of the pool, but he looked at the new tenant with concern. "What were you doing? You could have been—"
Not exactly.
Lydia interrupted. "Huh?" Eve put 2 fingers to the bridge of her nose, pinching it in exasperation.
"Tony, take a look at her feet for a second."
Doing as told, he looked down at them. "What do her feet have to do—" Lydia Lindell's feet were slender and dainty, like that one would expect of a grown, beautiful woman, with 2 differences. They were webbed, and a small amount of scales shimmered atop them. Wait, you're, Lydia ran a hand up her other arm towards her shoulder with a slight amount of nervousness.
Mermaid. Yeah. Half, actually.
Tony leaned back with his arms behind him to offer her support as he processed this new information. Finally, he frowned and looked up at his employer. "Eve, is there any other secrets I should know? I mean, you've got a vampire butler and a mermaid—"
Half.
Lydia interrupted without realizing it, then looked at him in surprise. "And a half mermaid for your best friend, so what else are you on?" Eve looked flabbergasted as she shook her head.
"Nothing,
Again, her friend interrupted.
Wait, you know about Morty?
Friend scratched his chin for a few seconds, then replied, "Yeah, I woke Mortimer in his coffin shortly after I started." Lydia's eyes grew wider with excitement as she mimicked the shape of the vampire's pajamas over her shape.
Did he have his...
"Yes!" Tony laughed and nodded. Feeling slightly ignored, Eve cleared her throat and tapped her foot as she held her arms at her hips. In unison, Tony and Lydia apologized, blushing slightly.
"As I was saying, no, there's nothing else that I can think of. I didn't tell you about Lydia because I figured it was up to her."
Eve said, rolling her eyes and holding one hand aloft in an expression of nonchalant indifference. Tony looked over at Lydia and tilted his head. "So, you really want drowning him?" Lydia giggled and turned her head, pushing the cartilage of one ear and her hair aside so that he could see what was behind them.
No. I've got gills behind my ears, so I can breathe water as easily as air. In fact, I need to keep hydrated at least once a day, or I'll start having problems.
Tony took a deep breath and let it out slowly, turning to face his employer calmly. "Sorry I got upset. Jumped to conclusions I shouldn't have." Eve nonchalantly waved a hand, dismissing his apology.
"It's understandable. Just remember that not everything is how it seems, especially in this place."
He started to walk off to the locker room.
"Why don't you 2 get back in the pool and talk while I change into something more appropriate?"
"Oh, okay." Tony blushed as he slowly sunk into the pool.
Don't worry, Tony. Unlike Morty, I don't bite. Much.
Lydia said, sticking out her tongue. Tony laughed as Lydia took a single fluid leap into the water, her dive leaving only a ripple. After a short while of swimming around and doing cannonballs, they both tread water, and Tony finally feels comfortable enough to ask the question that had been on his mind for the past few minutes. So, take it your mom was a full mermaid. The father, after all, despite being involved in the fishing industry and a tad odd, appeared to be fully human from the short time that Tony had seen him.
Yep. My dad met her when he was starting up his fishing empire, and they fell in love in the open sea. She passed away when I was young, but we shared a lot of time together, the three of us.
Lydia tread water slowly past him as she took this all in. Oh, sticking her tongue out, Lydia splashed him.
Hey, lighten up. I'm not ashamed to talk about myself or my family, so you shouldn't be afraid to ask.
After letting out a small exclamation of surprise, Tony shrugged, then began to swim backwards in a circle around her. Okay then, so what do you do? Is your father going to be paying for your stay here, or... Lydia shook her head and threw it back.
Ha! He wanted to pay in full. I talked him down to a third. No. I'm a DJ.
Really? Where do you work?
Ever hear of a place in Philly called The Warehouse?
Heard of it. I used to go there every once in a while. Lydia smirked.
Then you probably heard me scratching at least once then.
Tony shrugged once again. I never paid that much attention to which disc jockey he was playing that night though. There are only two I try to get requests from, and both have major lines. You probably know them. DJ Siren and DJ Audio Mayhem.
Well, that's me.
Huh?
DJ Siren is my stage name.
Lydia dove under that water, and Tony looked around for her and... What? Lydia resurfaced behind him, and he turned rapidly to face her.
Yeah. Always glad to meet a fan. I got a couple copies of my second album in my room if you want to listen sometime.
So, what have you two been talking about?
Eve's voice carried from the other side of the pool. Tony and Lydia looked at one another, then at her. Eve's face seemed to be concerned a little as she focused mostly on Lydia, who spoke first. Tony was just glad that most of his face was under the water at the moment. His face felt flushed as he saw Eve in a bathing suit. Sure, it was a one-piece, but it was still the least covered that he had seen her yet. He didn't know why, but that slight amount of uncovering made him feel warm, uncomfortable.
Why, Eve, we were just discussing the history of the audio aesthetic movement known as...
She was talking about her DJ skills, wasn't she?
Eve said, sighing and slipping into the pool. Kind of. Eve began swimming towards the two as he further explained. I got her on the topic, though. I used to go to the same club she DJs at, and never got close enough to do a request.
Yeah, Eve. Any man that's a fan of my stuff is a great catch.
Eve's face turned a shade of pink, and she started chasing after her best friend in the water.
I told you before, he's not my...